Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Make Life Less Taxing podcast, the show where we uncover what really creates freedom in life and business, and we'll explore stories of those who've learned how to build wealth with purpose.
Welcome back to the Make Life Less Taxing podcast. Today, I'm joined by James Farrell, founder of Ferrell Financial Freedom and creator of the FX3 Process, a structured way to help people stop just hoping things will work out and start planning for freedom with clarity and confidence. James, welcome to the show.
Daniel, what a pleasure and privilege to be here. Thank you for the invitation.
Great to have you on. We had a great conversation before we did this podcast, as we're doing it right now. But can you tell me a little bit more about you and the work that you do?
Yes, I am passionate about our work here at FX3, Ferrell Financial Freedom. In a sentence, we design tax-favored life and retirement plans that, when compared to traditional alternatives, may offer lower fees than mutual funds, returns just as good as the S&P 500. And when it's time to stop putting into your plan and start taking out of your plan, you could expect distributions 25% to 40% greater than you could expect from a traditional 401k or IRA. We're going to get you to stop worrying about retirement.
That's us. That sounds really exciting. So what originally drew you into this type of work, and what keeps you there for so many years?
Right. Why'd you come? Why'd you stay? Right. Great question. Well, at the risk of compromising my professional image, I will say that I had returned to the States from spending my young adulthood in Europe, and got a job teaching school. But I found quickly that my months were ending up with more days than dollars. And I was thoroughly committed, Daniel, at that time, to a ministry of feeding and clothing needy children. Those were my own, of course. So a little bit of so anyway, I started cruising the classifieds, and I saw an advertisement. It said, if you're not making this much per month, you need to call this number. And I thought it was a joke, Daniel, because after high school, I enlisted in the Army, one of the lowest paying jobs you can get. And then from the military, I went to the mission field. I thought the military was low paying, but the mission field was even lower paying. And then when I came back from the mission field, I was in teaching right down there competing with those two previously lowest paying positions. So when I saw that ad offering that kind of compensation, I'm like, no way, no one makes that kind of money. So I called the number, and they said, well, if that's what you want, this is what you have to do. You have to pass these exams and get these licenses. And I said, okay, let's see what happens. And so I did. And I was off to the races. So I know it's not noble and altruistic motivation for entering, but that's how I got in.
Yeah.
And then why'd I come? That's it. So it wasn't long before my part-time financial services position had more compensation than my full-time teaching position. So when I went full-time, of course, that income just kept on growing. And then I just kept on developing professionally, expanding my areas of expertise. And now I believe that when it comes to serving my community, I really do hold a unique value position. I believe that we can do more for our community in terms of protection for today, in terms of wealth growth for tomorrow, in terms of tax-favored income for day after tomorrow, and then for after the day after tomorrow, we're positioned to build and provide generational wealth for our community members. So I'm zealous and passionate and am utterly committed to the value that we bring to our community.
Yeah. Listen, I always love to hear the story. So basically, I'm going to summarize it. You were recruited into the business. And listen, same thing happened to me from that perspective, right? I kind of answered an ad in a similar way. Didn't know what it was all about. It sounded kind of good. And I got into the business. And, 30 years later, here I am. So, no, that's a great story. And you know what? You mentioned a couple of the things. And I think this is where the challenge is in our society. And that's part of what we're doing: make life less taxing and keep what is yours and break free. You've essentially broken free from some of the stereotypes kind of that you got into. And part of that stereotyping is just like doing the things that you're thinking are actually going to lead you in a certain way. But unfortunately, the opposite of that was the way to do it. And the one of the opposite things that I think is kind of a shame, you said you were a teacher. How come teachers are the people that are like the lowest paid, or one of the lowest paid people, when they're basically bringing up the next generation? They're
Oh,
bringing up kind
Daniel,
of that.
I so agree with your question, your position, and regrettably, sir, I have to say, you know, we, the saying goes, "Put your money where your mouth is," and if you want to know what one's values really are, it's not complicated. Look at their checking account balance and look at their calendar. Where do they spend their money and where do they spend their time? And then you put that out from home economics or personal economics to community economics or even national economics, and we reflect the lack of value that we have on education by the compensation we offer.
And
Yes,
then you
sir.
look at on the other spectrum, who are the, I'm not going to say they're the most paid, but when you look at all the entertainers and like you start talking about values, man, some of the values of the entertainers are like, I don't know, I don't even know if you can call them values. I mean, obviously they're values, but they're the opposite values, at least when I understand that traditional person might go and take a look at and think like, you know what, that's okay to be like that, where often they're kind of on the opposite and they're making all of this money, where you have individuals that are teaching and bringing up the next generation more at an organized way where, they're not getting paid quite a bit.
Couldn't agree with you more. But again, it really does come down to just as vulgar as a metric as follow the money.
Yeah.
So we expose our social values by what we pay money for.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that that's an institutional level only. That's personal level. If I,
Well,
I mean, think about the mega millions that move just in not only entertainment but professional sports.
yeah,
It's obscene, really. But again, it is what it is. It's a reflection of
that's
our cultural values.
exactly. Now, you talk a lot about how people get focused on accumulation, that they forget to protect what they've built. Can you expand on that a little bit more?
I would love to, and I so appreciate the question because the so we identify in any personal financial plan 4 phases. Phase one could be called the contribution phase, where you're putting money into some accumulation vehicle. Phase two would be the accumulation phase. So where what you put in is now growing or not. 2001, 40% loss. 2008, 50% loss. 2022, 30% loss. So it may be growing, maybe not. Um, and then after contribution and accumulation, we come to the distribution phase. And then the final, where you're taking out what you've put in and grown, hopefully, to live on in retirement. And then the final phase is the legacy phase
Mm.
or transfer phase, where what was not used during retirement is passed on to heirs or beneficiaries. So the appeal for the emphasis on accumulation is fear.
Mm.
You may run out of money, so you better get as much as soon as possible because you never know. You might end up in the poorhouse. And so there is this angst, this stress about getting as much as soon as possible. Now, there's nothing wrong with that, I guess, but it flies straight in the face of some of the oldest wisdom known to any culture, not just Western culture, but any culture. Do not worry about what you will eat. Do not worry about what you will wear. Um, uh, and each day has enough trouble unto its own, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so the accumulation becomes this focus of attention, and the tension there is I want to get as much as soon as possible so that I have something to live off in retirement versus I want to, so therefore that implies exposure to risk. We believe that risk equals opportunity. And on the other hand, we have the safety factor of saying, well, what good is it if I go one step forward just to go two steps
Mm.
back when, not if, but when 2001, 2008, 2022 come back? So that's a consuming, phase of the
Right.
personal financial plan life cycle. Um, and because it's so consuming, when one transitions from the accumulation phase to the distribution phase, one has become so conditioned for more and more and more and get and grow that uh, it's it's a con- it's a it can be a touchy conversation to challenge that status quo mentality of get to protect and preserve. Um, yeah, maybe that's a long enough answer. Maybe it's too long already.
No, you bring out a great point. Listen, I call myself a recovering CFP for exactly that reason. The reason I got out of the industry because I
Oh,
started to realize that,
I so hate to interrupt. I beg your
yeah,
pardon, but I did have just a button to close up that last point, and the thing about what I was trying to explain, Daniel, is that the message that comes from Wall Street and Washington, let's just call it like
yeah,
it is, oh yeah, it's a fear motivated and it's a greed motivated. It's a fear of missing out, right?
mm,
FOMO.
yeah,
Um, um, but when you look behind the curtain, there's no great and wonderful Oz there. It's just a guy with some levers on a machine. It's just, and so what's going on? And then you say, well, gee, I better move some of these accumulated amount to safe vehicles so that I can prevent loss from my gains. And the response, as you know better than most, is, oh no, don't do that. Just wait it out and the market will come
yeah.
back. And then you ask for translation for that comment, and it is, if you move any of your assets out from under my management, then my income goes down.
And it has already
Sorry.
gone down because the markets are down. So don't do it now.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah. Uh,
That's right.
listen, again, listen, that's where recovering CFP. I was there during, 2001, during 2008, 2009. It was March of 2009, I think was the lowest point. And I do remember going, okay, maybe this is the one. It will never come back, right? Like everybody's kind of losing their hope because it was almost like year and a half of seeing things kind of dropping. But again, this is, I think, where for me, what I discovered that the industry wasn't really teaching me how to help people. It was teaching me how to
Yeah.
sell more of their products and how to basically get at the money that the client has and keep it at the institution for as long as possible because they were always making money. That's, I think, the unfortunate thing. Most people don't understand that, Wall Street and a lot of these institutions, they're always making money. The clients, not so much. And I think that's where the challenge comes in. So, as
You, you
at what
remind me of
point?
you remind me of the story there, Daniel,
Yeah,
of the investor who is invited by the advisor to the advisor's home office,
uh,
and it's just amazingly luxurious, mahogany this and the best of that. And then he takes the investor, the client, down to the harbor where all the top advisors' yachts are
uh,
docked. And he said, these are the yachts by on the advisors own. He says, and the client says, well, this is very interesting, very impressive, but where are the clients' yachts?
Yeah, yeah. This is where the problem comes in when the advisor is doing better than the clients, because again, they're getting paid all the time, and from that perspective. But listen, at what point do the traditional system, because this is kind of what we're talking about, like 401k plans, market based planning, or even tax deferral, starts to break down for the families that you work with or that you start seeing and you're kind of helping?
Well, again, it's the analogy of the Las Vegas poker table works because you know campaign phase determines strategy.
Hmm.
I can't be a military leader in charge of a campaign with different phases to the campaign if I don't change the strategy to correspond to the phase of the campaign. And so if I transition from 30 plus years of accumulation into distribution and preservation, a change of campaign phase requires a change of strategy.
Hmm.
So if I stay with accumulate, 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 and which implies exposure to risk without moving to protection, preservation for hopefully even guaranteed distribution, then wow, that's where it breaks down, to use the word you asked. That's
Hmm.
where it breaks down. Now, if I just keep on accumulating, then and I don't have a safety net or I don't have some sort of guarantees that allow me to leverage what I've accumulated into a lifestyle in retirement or whatever other my values may be, charitable giving, etc.
Hmm.
Then what am I doing? Why?
Yeah.
So I think that transition from accumulation to um, preservation and distribution uh, is where the breakdown may happen. Let me just insert this, if I may. I'm reminded of a leader with worldwide, at least Western worldwide impact from 3 centuries ago, um, and he said to those who followed him, "Gents, you have a stewardship responsibility to make as much as you can so that you can save as much as you can, all to the end that you can give away as much as you possibly can." And that to me makes sense. And in order to do that, I believe one must uh, recognize the need for change in strategy
Uh,
that corresponds to change in campaign phase.
Yeah, yeah, you bring a good point, and I think a lot of people are being told save, 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 and when they get into that, okay, they've got to withdraw money out. Usually, they are forced, if it's in 401k plan, they are forced by the government to take minimums out and all of this. But again, because they've been so conditioned, they forget to change that. Yeah, there is a bit of a different strategy. What's going to happen when they do enter that stage where they have to start taking money out, and then I think often they don't even think about it, how that's going to go and affect them. And I think that's kind of the biggest thing where it comes down to taxes and everything.
Oh my goodness, I couldn't agree with you more. I'm amazed at people who have accumulated whatever amount in their qualified, i.e., pre-tax, that is 100% taxable, of vehicles, and they're surprised to learn it's 100% taxable. That I'll come across prospective clients, Daniel, and they'll say, "Huh, well, James, I've done well. I'm a millionaire. I've got $1 million in my IRA." I said, no, you don't. Not only do you not have $1 million, but you have no way of knowing how much less than $1 million you have. And unless you can accurately predict exactly what the income tax rates will be, not only in the first year of distribution, and like you said, that often means required minimum distribution,
No,
but even more than that to live on. And then every single year after that, for the rest of your life, that unless you can accurately predict what those income tax rates will be, can you possibly know how much of that $1 million is left after tax to fund your retirement lifestyle? And of course, the answer is no. And then and if you don't know how much money you have left for retirement, can that make it difficult to plan for retirement? And of course, the answer is not difficult, impossible.
Yeah.
So I totally agree with you, sir.
Yeah. I think the chances are that most people, if they have accumulated $1 million, they will probably pay $1 million in taxes. And most people would find that rather shocking. But
Mm.
I think that is the reality of what's going to happen. Again, unless they do a little bit more proactive planning before. And as in very early in my life when I was working with a coach, he told me one thing, and I did not always adhere to it. But he says, Daniel, anytime you start a business, the number one question before you start a business you have to answer: how are you going to get out? And I think this kind of
Mm.
same thing when people do investments or they do anything. The number one question they should be asking themselves is, what is the exit strategy? Because most money is wasted or lost, right, during the exit from wherever they're at. And just like it's important in business, I think it's important when people are looking at their investments and what they're doing, because it sounds great to put money into a 401k plan, but as we're talking about now, what happens after? What's the exit strategy? And most people would have no idea what that's even going to look like
That's
because they
so
don't think about it.
interesting you bring that up, Daniel. A related but serving a useful metaphor for that. And I'm not a mountain climber, Daniel, but I hear that more deaths occur on the descent
It's-
than on
yeah,
the ascent up of the mountain.
yeah, no, it's a
In
great
other
point.
words,
I
in other word, yeah. In other words, there's
100%.
greater danger coming
Yeah.
out of the mountain than going into the mountain or up the
Yeah.
mountain.
And I think the
Yeah.
same thing is when you're talking about retirement, because there is this whole big picture like, oh, I've got to go and accumulate all of this money. But what if, as we're talking about 2001, 2008, that happens the year that you retired? Like that could be
Oh
very
my goodness! Don't even
devastating.
get me started
Yeah.
on sequence of returns.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So, what do successful people often assume they already have kind of checked off or they already have it, when in reality, they have just kind of kicked the can down the road? Like, I know we were talking about taxes. Are there other things too that you kind of see that people think that, hey, I'm all set? But when you have that, when you sit down with them and you start to explore really what's going on, they start to realize that maybe not so much.
Daniel, that's an excellent question. And here at FX3, we have a process. One is to identify the threats, and then number two, once the threats are identified, we scan the industry to find the best possible way to at least mitigate, if not eliminate, those threats. And then the third and final step of that is take action. And so, what are the threats to your point?
Yeah.
Not only is there threat of loss to income tax, again, it's unknown and unknowable. It's just amazing that it's not. Anyway, a second threat is, as we've already mentioned, the threat of loss to market volatility.
Mm.
Uh, Again, 2001 with the with the dot-com bubble crash, 40% loss. 2008 with the housing or mortgage bubble popping, 50% loss. That's when that not very funny joke was going around that I'm sure you remember, where my 401k is now a
So,
201k.
like,
And people would do exactly what you just did and chuckle, but it would hurt because it was so true and so painful. And there is no complaint letter. There's no
yeah.
complaint
Well,
department to write
and I
to.
think, James,
It's
what most
gone.
people don't realize, if you lose 50%, in order to get back to where you were, you need to get 100% rate of return.
Absolutely.
Because people,
So
oh, if it just
important.
goes back, no, it's not 50, it's 100. So you got to basically double now, right? What,
Thank you
what you've
very much.
what you've had.
So we have threat of loss to income tax,
Yeah.
unknown and unknowable future income tax rates. And if you say, well, how bad could it really be, Jamie? I mean, come on, don't be this doomsday prophet. Well, I don't know how bad it could be, but I know how bad it has been. And one thing we know, not in a biblical Christian timeline, but in a secular humanist timeline, especially in the financial services timeline, that time tends to be cyclical,
Mm.
not linear. Now, so what has happened serves as a valid precedent for what could or even will happen. So the last 2 years of World War II, 1944-45, the highest marginal income tax rate. Are you sitting down, Daniel? Do you have your seatbelt on?
I do.
Okay.
I already know what the answer is, but I love it
Of
where you're
course
going
you
with it
do.
because most people are
Yeah,
not aware what is
of course
possible
you
and what can
know. Sure
happen,
you
right?
do. And that's why I so enjoy your company.
Yeah.
94% of every dollar above and beyond $200,000, which was a lot of money in the
Yeah.
last 2 years of World War. It's a lot of money today. But you say, well, come on, surely that's an outlier, Jamie. Well, maybe, maybe not. I don't know. So let's fast forward to the decade of the 70s. Okay, so now we have what was the highest U.S. marginal income tax rate during the entire decade of the 70s? I don't know. Well, easy to remember. It was 70%. Okay, well, gee, that's interesting. Well, what's the highest U.S. marginal income tax rate today? Well, it's 37% for the highest of all income earners. Wait, 37%? That's just over half of what it was in the decade of the 70s and just over a third of what it was at its highest point. So we're at historically low income tax rates? Yes. So what's the other bookend on that bookshelf? 39, yes, that is trillion. Yes, that is 12 zeros.
Yeah.
And yes, that is the official, not the real debt amount, by the way. Don't even get me started on unfunded commitments to Medicaid, Medicare, infrastructure, etc., which makes that 39 double, literally double into 78 trillion. It's just heinous, the fiscal irresponsibility that we just take for normal. Anyway, so you say, well, so what? So what? What does that mean to me? Well, it means that on that debt, the interest, forget about the principal, just the interest, Daniel, has now surpassed $1 trillion. And for those who know about these things, they call that the canary in the coal mine. So the canary does not come back alive from the coal mine after $1 trillion, which means it's mathematically untenable to sustain that debt. Okay, fine. We have to pay at least the interest on the debt. So we just need some revenue, right? Yeah, we just need some revenue. So can we start a podcast business? Can we sell some life? No. What does the government do to generate revenue? Well, increase taxes. Well, how high? Well, first of all, how low? Well, historically low. And then it could be double or triple. So now you have that qualified. You got to love the euphemisms coming out of Washington. Oh, I'm qualified. Aren't you qualified? Kind of qualified. Sorry, I digress. Yeah. So now you could have 2/3 or 1/2 left over in a historical context of what you think you have after taxes. So I'm sorry for digressing so much, but it's so important to get this message out, Dan, and I'm so glad you're doing this. So yes, we identify the threat of loss to income tax. We identify the threat of loss to market volatility. And then, as a recovering CFP, we must identify the threat of loss to custodial fees. I've often thought maybe I've chosen the wrong profession. I should have been a CFP or a weatherman, because those are two professions where you can get it wrong and still get paid. I mean, I get it wrong. I could get fined. I could lose my license. I could go to jail. CFP gets it wrong. And they say, no, just hold on and it'll come back. Translate, please. Oh, well, I still get paid because of the AUM. Anyway, so we identify these threats. Oh, and then there's one more, Daniel. There's the threat of loss to inflation, because some people will say, well, that's fine. I'll just move my money over here to these quote unquote safe money vehicles, CDs, certificates of deposit, money market, bonds, what have you. And that would be true. They would dodge the bullet, if you will, of threat of loss to market volatility. But then they have less than inflation rate growth. So the longer they keep their money there, the more their money's buying power is going backwards. They're actually losing money by saving money from market loss. So income tax loss, market volatility loss, custodial fee loss, and inflation loss. We here at FX3, first of all, identify those 4 threats of loss, and then create plans that either mitigate or altogether eliminate those threats of loss. That was a really long answer. You're such a patient host, Dave.
You brought out a great question. As soon as you start talking about 94% income tax, I think there was the famous story of
There is a famous story.
yeah
Yes.
of
Are you
of
going to indulge me, or tell it yourself?
well, you go ahead and you share it. I'm sure it's the
I'm
same story that
assuming
I'm
we're on
thinking
the
about.
same sheet of music here.
Yeah,
So I engage rooms full of people on a regular basis, and just to have some fun and get the action going, I say, okay, who can tell me the highest income top marginal income tax rate ever? And they don't know.
yeah,
And so I'll say, okay, 94%. Okay. And that was in the last 2 years of World War II, and it was for any dollar above and beyond $200,000 per year. Now, who even made that kind of money back there? Can anyone think of anyone who even made $200,000 a year? And of course, no one can. And so I'll say, well, how about a clue? How about you tell me someone back then, last 2 years of World War II, who started his career as a movie actor and ended his career as a politician. And it's so fun, Daniel, because if they're boomers, then they'll get the answer right off the bat.
yeah,
But if they're millennials or less, they'll say, oh, Arnold Schwarzenegger, which I just find is so hilarious.
yeah,
Anyway, so it was Ronald Reagan
yeah,
who would make about $100,000 a movie. And so he would make a movie in the first quarter of the year, ching, ching, 100K. Make a second movie in the second quarter of the year, ching ching, 200K. Now we're at the end of July. For any dollar he would make above and beyond that $200,000, he would pay 94 cents in federal income
yeah,
tax. Now, some people will say, well, what happened to the other 6 cents, Jamie? Did it go to Nancy? Which, of course, tells me that they don't know Ronald Reagan's story, because he wasn't even married to Nancy back then. But no, it did not go to whoever his spouse was back then. It went to the state of California, because the 94 is just the federal.
yeah.
And then you have to add the 6. So at the risk of an extremely cheesy pun, it literally made no sense for him to continue working. So he would turn off the lights in the studio, take the rest of the year off, come back January 1st the following year, and start making movies again.
Yeah.
Was that the story you were thinking of,
That
sir?
was the story I was thinking, and you say it so much better than I do. So
Oh,
I'm
you're
glad
too
that
kind.
you have gone and shared that.
Great
And I
story.
did not think about Arnold Schwarzenegger as far as
Okay.
the time change, but yes, that definitely makes sense, because that's what they would know, because most people don't know about Ronald Reagan and where they are. I mean, Ronald Reagan has made a lot of changes, and we spoke about this before around, I'm originally from Czechoslovakia, communism. I believe that
Yeah.
he's the one that essentially started the whole process of the Berlin Wall and everything going down. So he was very impactful to that. But that is a great story, and
Can you
and
quote him? Can you quote him in that exact context of the Berlin Wall coming down?
well, is it Mr. Gorbachev?
Mr. Gorbachev. There you go. Well done.
Yeah,
Yes,
I can't
sir.
remember. Did he say bring down the wall, or I can't remember?
Tear down that wall, bring down that
Yeah,
wall. I'm
tear
not
down
sure of
that
the
wall.
verb
Yeah,
either, but
yeah.
yes.
No, that's great. Now, you know what? As we're talking about, wealthy individuals and people that have money or high income earners, why is it that so many of them feel less in control the more money they're actually making? Because, people tend to think, oh, hey, you know what, my problem is if I just made more money, things would be easier. I would have less problems. But often money is more or less like an amplifier of things, right? So what do you actually see from your experience, especially with the higher income earners? Why are they losing, control over what they have?
Wait, are you suggesting that we live in a consumerist culture? And the more we make, the more we spend, and the more we spend, the less we have, and the less we have, the higher the stress? Is that? Excuse I'm being facetious. No, I'm not being facetious. I'm being
You're being
sincere.
realistic. That's the unfortunate thing about that. Only
That's
if you
the
were facetious.
unfortunate thing,
Yeah.
Daniel. Yes, sir. Um, so just this morning, I was on an appointment with a multi-millionaire, and widowed, father, grandparent, um, plays golf.
Yeah.
That's his life. He plays golf and plays with his grandchildren. Um, but because he has succeeded, and how he has succeeded by aggressive risk investing, he feels like, hey, it ain't broke, don't fix it. Stay the course. Worked back then, working now, it'll work tomorrow. So, yes, there is exposure to risk, um, but but because of experience, and I come across these millionaires all the time. It's a control thing.
Mm.
It's a fear thing.
Are
I'm
you
not gonna
telling
go
me he's
so
still
far.
driving a Model T Ford, or is he driving a Tesla now? Maybe not Tesla, but
I'm that might be too identifier of a characteristic. So to protect his privacy, I won't tell you. But the point is, yeah, it's not that bad. It's not Mr. Scrooge
yeah,
hovering over his piles of money, right? But there is a certain je ne sais quoi um, that comes with success,
yeah,
of money success, and it becomes the problem there, sir, is that I believe that it crosses or at least blurs the line between what I do or have done and who I am.
mm,
It blurs into the identity issue. And if I believe my identity is because of my investment success and I stop investing, what's the implication there to my identity? And I
mm,
see that. I see it all the time, Daniel.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, is that it's
to
the
release
psychology behind
control,
money? That's what you're talking about. Is the
that's the
psychology behind it,
psychology
right?
behind money.
And when I
Yes, sir.
brought up driving a Model T, you just kind of said, "Well, just leave it if it's not broken and all that stuff." Well, life keeps on moving, and again, the old the old verbiage of saying, you know what, doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result, right?
Mm.
That's all part of it. But I think the other part of that whole thing of keep on kind of doing the same thing, as you mentioned, it creates a whole bunch of danger. And like you said, often it comes down really to the identity that somebody has, and it's difficult to change. Like how do you help somebody to start seeing something they're not seeing, even though it's almost blatant in their face?
There's the challenge. I go back to John Wesley's quote. The whole money is a great servant, but a horrible master.
Mm,
And so, yes, stewardship, we are to make as much as we can so that we can save as much as we can, but not for accumulation and then identity. Look at me, but to give away as much as I can. That's what we're going to be ultimately. Uh, that's how success is ultimately measured,
yeah.
I believe.
Well, you know what? I actually remember when we were talking about. I had these business cards made, and it says on it, the best way to help poor people is that you are not one of them. And then I forgot about what it said on the other side when we were talking about it. I actually found it. And then to arrange your estate planning and give back incredibly to less fortunate people using other people's money. And I think this is really what it all comes down to, right? It's not what you have, what you accumulate. I think deep down, all of us, we're not really interested in accumulating the biggest pile of, dead presidents, green bills in a big pile so that we can just kind of look at it and dance around it and be happy. I think it's really what that money allows us to do and what we're doing with it. And I think so often when you just mentioned people are into save, 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 then they're forced to take the money out of it. If they don't step back and do a little bit of planning, and I believe that's what you're explaining here that you do with people, is let's just kind of listen, let's just kind of take back what is yours and break free from the ways maybe you've been doing things or from the traditional way of doing things. But like even take a break and step back a little bit and I start asking the question, why am I doing this? What's the purpose?
That's right.
What's really
Very
what
good.
is all this about? Because one of the things that I did with clients when I was an advisor, I would ask them this question. Let's just imagine, James, that at the end of the day, like you wake up tomorrow morning and everything you own is like sitting on a big pile of money. Like there was just a big pile of money. Like if you have a house, car, investments, whatever, it's all there. Would you go back and repurchase everything that you owned before? Or would you make some changes? And like every single person would always answer, well, of course I would make some changes. And I said, so
Yeah.
why aren't you making them right now?
Yeah.
And we're back
That's
to what you
great.
mentioned is like, well, because I've always done it this way. I've always had
Mhm.
and it's like, well, but hold on, we can go and part of it is name of my company is Reset Global. Reset, the whole idea. Every morning we wake up and we literally can completely choose to live a different life. We can hit that reset button and do something different. And I think when it comes to finances, I think as you mentioned with, some of the clients that you work with, they've just been doing things for so long they feel like they don't have the option to reset, but it's like we all do.
So interesting. What a brilliant point you raise. I'm reminded of a very challenging, disquieting quote by one of my favorite authors named C.S. Lewis. And I think it's in Screw Tape Letter, or maybe it's in the Great Divorce. I think it might be in the Great Divorce, but the quote is something like this. I'm not going to do it justice, but he says, "There is a point which no man can mark, beyond which turning back is no longer an option."
Yeah.
Now, if that don't scare you, I don't know what will.
Yeah. But
But
we
so
all have
there's
a
this sort of that conditioning
yeah,
factor that goes into choosing a way to follow. Well, it's like Lucy. It's like Lucy in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
yeah,
Or actually, it was Edmund, her big brother. Well, I can still see the light into the spare room. I'm okay.
yeah,
Um, but there comes a point where you can no longer see the light through the closet, the wardrobe door into the spare room,
yeah,
and now it's like, where am I? How did I get here? And now how do I get back? And Lewis's quote in The Great Divorce is, "There is a point which no man can mark,
yeah.
beyond which return is no longer an option." Scary thought, that.
That is, but at the same time, I think I always tell people the greatest gift God has ever gave us is the choice. Kind of
Mhm.
the biggest challenge in life is we have a choice. Like, you don't see a dog trying to become a cat, or trying to act like a cat. Like, a dog is a dog. With human beings, because we have all the different choices, we can become so confused,
Oh my
right?
goodness.
and and
This is
and especially when it comes down to our identities, and kind of who we are. And I think this is where it comes down to, as you were mentioning with your clients, they suddenly start to identify who they are because of maybe the money they accumulated or what they're doing. And it's like, no, hold on, we're not human doings, we're human beings. What's the most important thing is you making the decision. Who are you, right? And who is the person that you are becoming? And again, you know what, if you don't like who you are today, you can make a choice and decision and choose something different. But we've been so conditioned. And I did personal development, and one of the questions that impacted me big was, they asked the question, hey, do you believe that kids have the choice of going to school or not? And most people say no, they don't have a choice, they have to go to school. And it's like, no, no, everybody's got a choice. They may not like the consequences of the choice. If a child chooses not to go to school, right, what the consequences are going to be, right? But they still have a choice. And I think this is where often we feel like, oh, we don't have a choice, where no, we always have a choice. We just may not like the consequences. But I think sometimes we're literally conditioned so much where we do feel like we don't have the choice. And I think that's where the danger is, where we kind of give up that hope and feel like, well, it's just what it is. I can't do anything different. It's like, no, yes, you can.
That's
But
so good, Daniel. So good, man. Yeah. Well done. Well said. Yeah.
so, what tends to change when someone starts thinking about their financial plans as more of a freedom strategy, because that's what you're talking about, and not just as a saving strategy?
Well, it's like, what did you want to do or be before you were a millionaire? Oh, really? I get to talk about this? And and there's like this glow.
Yeah,
Well, gee, I always thought it would be great to, and then the list
just to
begins,
begin.
right?
You remind me of a movie that I watched. I can't remember the name of it, but the question was, how much did they pay you first to give up on your dreams?
Oh, that was Rainmaker with Matt Damon.
Yeah. And I thought, that's a powerful question, because often that's what happens.
Huge.
Like, both
What?
you and I were
That's
talking
right.
about getting recruited into the business, right? And it's like, but we didn't stay where we were when we got recruited. We kind of evolved. And I think that's what happens with a lot of people. They start something and they literally stay the same. I do have a saying, I don't know where I borrowed it from, but like, most people die at the age of 25. They just don't get buried until 75, where people just kind of give up on life and they don't know what they're, what they're doing, because they don't question. They don't believe that they have the option to actually make changes in their life.
So, the with privilege or authority comes
Mhm.
responsibility. Um, and that's not comfortable. Uh, there is an accounting. It is appointed unto man once to die, and after this comes judgment. And we have been entrusted with talents, and the owner of those talents, who is not us, will ask, what did you do with what I entrusted to your administration, to your stewardship? And some will say, well, I'd heard that you were a really tough taskmaster, so out of fear, I didn't do anything with it, but at least I didn't lose it. Here it is back. And the others will say, well, I was honored by the privilege of your trust.
Hmm.
And here's the return on investment. I doubled what you left in my care. Well done. So this is real. These are not just bedtime stories or fairy tales. This is,
you're alluding to the to the talents, right? And the one thing, as you're mentioning that, and it was in the last couple of years when I was going over that, there's one verse in there where the master has given to each according, right, to their own skills, to what they already had knowledge. So the first one that was basically called the wicked servant, he had the ability to do the things that he needed to do with what he was given, but he chose not to because he bought into the fear where he said, hey, you're a strict master, you've sown where you haven't reaped. And I'm like going, oh, he's describing a business owner, like a true business owner, because when you run a business, you own the business, you're not the business, right? So nothing wrong with that. In the past, I looked at it as a negative, like, oh, well, he just like stole stuff from, no, he didn't steal stuff. He just basically didn't have to do all the work because of what he was doing, but he gave to each according to their abilities. And I think this is what often people miss in that, in that beautiful story, is like, he had the abilities. He just chose not to do anything with it. He just chose the easy part to just go and bury it. And I think this is where, for us, what are we doing with the gifts that we have? And then the other thing too, that's very interesting. Why did he give it to the guy that had the most? Why didn't the guy in the middle? He did this, he had what was it? 1 talent? Was it 2 and
it
5?
depends on the gospel narrative that you choose, but I think a safe summary is 1, 5, and 10, or
1, 5, and 10, or something.
Yeah.
But the other thing too that's important from that, and again brings a little bit more context, like 1 talent at that time was roughly about, in today's money, I've heard about 1.2 million or somewhere there. So it wasn't like, oh, here's a penny, do something with it, and he goes and bury it. No, it was like a lot of wealth. And again, the question is, if somebody were to give me $1 million, what am I going to go and do with it, right? And again, as an entrepreneur, I'm sure I would go and do certain things. But he said, hey, you could have at least give it to the bank and get interest on it.
He did say that. He did say that, yes.
And the question comes, as we're talking about here, not only with the finances somebody's given, but about our life, what are we doing with it? That becomes really, really important. So, I do have a question for you. I wanted to ask at the beginning, and I keep on forgetting. What does FX3 stand for? Like, is there a bit of a story behind that? What?
There is. I got a little. I permitted myself a little literary license. So, if it's Ferrell Financial Freedom, it's F times 3, FX3. But I also allowed myself a little twist, and that is effects, the effect, right? So there are 3 effects. Our plan has 3 effects. FX3, 3 effects. That is protection for today, protected growth for tomorrow, and tax favored income for day after tomorrow. So 3 Fs and 3 effects, FX3.
Yeah, wow, no, that's great. So what's one of the insights about tax strategy or late life planning that you wish that more people understood a little bit earlier in their life?
Oh my goodness. So I was with another millionaire yesterday on appointment, and he, unsolicited, he just came out with it, and it was so revealing. He says, so I asked my dad, when should I start preparing for late life planning? And my dad told me, Jamie, he said, 30 years ago. I said, thanks a lot, Dad. 30 years ago. But that was so revealing. So here you have a guy who, again, is a millionaire plus. And his dad, with the wisdom of the years and the benefit of hindsight, said, if I were you, I would have done it 30 years ago. So that's late life planning. So there was a two-part question there: efficient tax planning and late life planning. One at a time. So you don't own your quote unquote qualified retirement plan, traditional IRA, traditional 401k. You have a partner, and the partner's name is actually, I have two partners. It's a married couple. It's Uncle Sam and his wife, Aunt Iris. Thank you for that courtesy chuckle.
Yeah,
That
no,
was about as
I have not heard
amazing.
that one yet. So you learn something new
I'm
every
taking
day.
credit
I
for
like
that
that.
one.
I like that one.
I know. Don't quit my day job. I'll starve as a comedian. I know. My daughters tell me that all the time. I can see their eyes rolling back in their head right now. You're so corny, Dad. But yeah, and so you didn't pay what you owed when you put it in, again at the contribution phase. So you went into debt with the government. Another famous Ronald Reagan one-liner.
Mm.
He says, "What are the 8 scariest words you could ever hear?" You know this one, Daniel?
Uh,
It's phone.
I think I've heard it. I don't remember it though. So
He
go ahead.
says, "I'm from the government and here to help." I
Yes,
just love
that
that.
sounds rather scary.
Yeah, for you, especially more than most, yes.
Yeah.
Um, but so you have this silent partner, and in that 401k or IRA, there is no clause that says we as the government have authority over, control over, access to an unknown and unknowable amount of your accumulated value in
Yeah.
that 401k.
No.
Wow. So basically, with the 401k or IRA or traditional IRA, you're basically signing a blank check and inviting the IRS to fill in the blank, and that's what they get to keep from your account.
Yeah, I
So,
think
so to answer your question, it is urgent to divorce yourself from the IRS. The earlier, the better. I'm of the opinion, based on proof mathematically, that taxes must go higher and much higher in order to just prevent becoming the United States of China.
somebody's got to pay for it. That's what it comes down to, right? And
There is such a thing as foreclosure on a mortgage.
yeah,
Yes. Um, so you can do that. The most popular ways are doing a Roth conversion, or starting out a Roth. If it's too late to start out, you can do a Roth conversion, or you can actually fund a Roth. Are there income limits? There are. Are there other restrictions? There are, but it's still, you're saying goodbye to Uncle Sam and Aunt Iris
Hmm.
and severing that partnership forever. The
No.
second way, somewhat more sophisticated and requires deeper knowledge of Internal Revenue Code Title 26, Section 7702, where Congress has their definition of what is and then what no longer is a permanent life insurance policy. And by leveraging those rules and those laws in that definition that Congress wrote into law in the Internal Revenue Code, you can do, wow, powerful, creative solutions and break free from IRS control effectively. So that would be my part to the question of income tax planning. Get as far as free as possible, as soon as possible, by using some of those available strategies. The second part of your question was regarding late life planning. Well, that also has an evolution to that story. You started out with, back in the day, with the traditional long-term care policy. That whole industry has basically crashed and burned. It's just it's a lesson on failure, actuarially speaking. just didn't see longevity and morbidity going through the roof like it has, and none of the premiums for that amount of coverage work anymore. So you have providers bailing the industry. There's only less than a handful left, and they're not writing any new long-term care policies because of the exposure to risk. And those that are still in the industry have either, to maintain the premium the same, have sliced the amount of benefit available for that premium, or to maintain the amount of benefit the same, have skyrocketed the premium required to continue to provide that benefit. So it's a huge crisis. And what that brought was something actually from Europe. About 25 plus years ago, the insurance industry uh, introduced an idea that was already popular in Western Europe, and that is the idea of living benefits, where you can take a permanent life policy death benefit and make it available as a living benefit so that you don't have to die to use it. So now the insured has a heart attack or stroke or cancer or what have you, and now I've got this bucket of tax-free cash available to me that wouldn't be available with the traditional life insurance model. Then that has now most recently evolved into using a s- you can use different instruments, but one of the more popular ones is becoming using a fixed indexed annuity and attaching a long-term care rider to it. So now you've got X in this annuity, and um, in case of a long-term care event, you have you have guaranteed that that X will go to 3X to help pay for the long-term care event. And you say, well, what if I never have a long-term care event, which is a huge, huge concern from the traditional model? Um, then it still grows with very above inflation rate, not double digit, but close to double digit growth, um, and with access. And what you don't need, you can leave to your heirs or beneficiaries. So there's been a very encouraging evolution in the late life planning. But the point is, to answer your question, the sooner the better, because I'll never be younger and I'll never be healthier than I am today. And so, since cost is a function of age and health, then it just makes sense to get as much as soon as possible. And if you can have one of those most recent iterations, if you will, of a solution, then you get your cake and eat it too. You don't have to have a long-term care event in order to benefit from the strategy. But if you do have a long-term care event, it's safer and smarter and stronger than really any other alternative I can imagine.
No.
Really long answer. You're so patient and gracious.
No. Listen, you bring out a great view on this. Listen, as we're closing down, I've got these four. I call them rapid fire question. It's kind of the first thought that comes to your mind. Just kind of sometimes it's a one word answer,
Okay.
or very short answer that we go through there. What's a favorite book that really shaped your thinking?
Professionally or personally?
Either. It's your pick.
Oh, without a doubt, it'd be the Bible.
Yeah, you're saying the number one answer for this question, so that's right. It's your pick. So no, that is actually the number one. Followed by morning habit you can't live without.
Oh, my first appointment each day is workout physically, and my second appointment is worship
Yep.
my King and Savior Jesus.
Yeah,
Yes.
no, that's also number one answer. So I'm just keeping mentally track of that. So just letting you know, but those are the ones
Sure.
now. What's one bucket item list that you haven't checked off yet?
Oh my goodness, I'm so glad you answered it. This summer I'm going to climb Machu Picchu in
Awesome,
Peru. Yeah,
perfect. I will.
been around the whole world almost, but
Yeah,
haven't been to Machu Picchu, so very much looking forward to the summer.
that's great. What's a surprising hobby or interest that really recharges you?
Swimming.
Hmm.
It is surprising because I don't consider myself a swimmer. I wouldn't show well in a competitive swim meet, but I happen to grow up on an island in the middle of the Niagara River on the Canadian border. Um, and you have to cross the Niagara River to get on and off the island I grew up on. And now each summer I go up and I swim
Oh,
round trip from my childhood island over to the mainland and back. And it's just
that's cool.
so rewarding.
Yeah. So what is the distance like from the shore
Two
to?
kilometers round trip. The
Oh,
two and a half kilometers round trip. Yeah.
yeah. Oh, okay.
About one and a quarter kilometer
Yeah.
one way
Yeah, that's
across.
a
It's
pretty good. That's a pretty
not a
good
big
distance
river.
still. I mean, in a river, you do have the current on it, so that becomes a little bit more difficult. So that's a lot longer.
That's exactly right. And if you notice the name of the river, you know that it downstream from that river, you have Niagara Falls.
Yeah. So you
So you better.
you don't want to make it down the river too much.
That's right. Shoot, that's right.
Yeah.
But yes, it's like a playground for me to
Yeah.
be in such a massive body of water. And now, do I take childhood buddies who are still there with their boat alongside to monitor me and to block traffic so I don't get
Yeah.
run over by a speedboat? Of course. And so there's prudence in their safety, but still, it's
Yeah.
no fins and just go after it,
Yeah.
and
No,
it's thoroughly
I don't know
enjoyable.
what it is, but I think with the current, depending on it, again, it's not like a slow current. Like you're talking quite a bit.
Oh no,
It
yeah, you're
probably
gonna
is
end up
like 2
quite a bit
kilometers one
downstream.
way. Yeah.
That's
So
right. Yes, well, I love that.
you're
Yes.
doubling the distance. Listen, I've got this one last question. I call it the hot one. Fast forward to the end of your life and imagine that everyone forgot everything you ever taught them or showed them or they learned from you, but they do remember kind of this one last message. What would you want them to really, what would you want that message to be?
I think the only thing that really matters when all else is said and done is, have I learned to love?
Mm,
And if I could be remembered as the guy when they were with him, they felt genuinely loved, then that to me is a successful life.
mm. Wow, what a powerful and perspective shifting conversation, James. Thank you so much for sharing your journey. Where can people find out a little bit more about you and the work that you do?
Sure, we have posted who we are and how we may bring value at ferrellfinancialfreedom.com. Um, I can be reached at James at ferrellfinancialfreedom.com via email. Would love to engage with our listeners. And my thing is, Daniel, life is short. So I bring value, I make a difference, and I gotta have fun.
Yeah. Well,
So bring value, make a difference, and have fun because
oh,
life is short.
sure.
So
Yeah.
I'm confident that if our listeners reach out to me, either via our website or email, James at ferrellfinancialfreedom.com, we can definitely bring them value and make a difference in their financial planning.
Oh, perfect. If you're listening, be sure to check out James' website. We will have the links and everything in the show notes, so you can go and grab it from there. James, thank you again for your time and your message. And remember, life less taxing isn't just about money, it's about freedom, clarity, and purpose. Keep building wealth, keep protecting your legacy, and keep living the untaxable lifestyle. We'll see you next time on the Make Life Less Taxing podcast. Thank you again, James.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of Make Life Less Taxing podcast. Be sure to check out our other top advisor interviews at makelifelesstaxingpodcast.com.